Correct. So let me quickly, you heard this debate. I just want a quick sense from the House. How many of you would be in favor of the past mess? I'm not talking about the ones going forward, but the past ones of re-auctioning the ones which have failed. Well, yeah, so the House clearly, by a small majority, seems to believe that re-auctioning at least cleans up the past mess. I want to move very quickly on to railways, because this is another very big one that needs to be addressed. We've got points number 7 and 8. Our first one is just corporatize Indian railways, break them up into 4 or 5 regional autonomous units. China has done it very successfully. We are also saying list these companies so that there is shareholder pressure, there is competition, and then we've said induct private capital into running trains, into running stations. If all of this can be done in the aviation sector, then why not in the Indian railways? Of course, the corollary point is that you've got to have a very strong regulator and a professional regulator. Along with that, we are saying point number 8, which is to start building high-speed rail networks in India. We are saying make a beginning with the Shatabdi trains, convert them one by one into high-speed trains, and we've said start with a pilot project, start with Mumbai Ahmedabad. It probably will be your, if that succeeds, then you can replicate that elsewhere. Shailesh.
I think this is the single biggest favor that the new Prime Minister can do to the country. The railways is one asset that is run very inefficiently, and we have lots of friends in the railways who are the best engineers in the country. Why should operations and maintenance of the railways be suboptimally managed? Number one. Number two, the railways can contribute to the entire productivity of the nation by just making sure that cargo moves off highways. So today the multimodal share of the railways is steadily declining for cargo. If the Prime Minister can make it, a 10% jump in the next 5 years, this country will change.
Would you agree with our suggestions?
Yes, absolutely. How do you do it? Number one, make the railways into a corporation and get rid of the railway budget on an annual exercise. Number two,
get rid of the railway ministry.
No, you'll need a ministry.
You need a Ministry of Transport.
Yeah, so you have an NHAI.
Yes.
You have an NHAI and you have a highways ministry. So you need some kind of ministry, but you definitely need to corporatize the railways. Number two, focus on high-speed rails.
Yes.
Now, just to give you an example, I fly Beijing, Shanghai in 2.5 hours. I do the train journey in high-speed rail in 4.5 hours. Right. Imagine doing that in Bombay and between Bombay and Delhi.
Vinayak.
The reform of the railways was suggested in great depth by the Rakesh Mohan Committee report of 2002.
10 years ago.
It is a 3-phase program. First, you have to reform the existing establishment. How do you reform it? Ministry of Railways only for policy by the elected representatives. The politicians' view, policy for the railways. And below it, an executive board consisting of non-railway people also, and as you rightly mentioned, in parallel, a very strong independent regulator. Right. This is stage 1, reforming. Stage 2, once this is set, is corporatization. And as you again rightly said, you can corporatize either geographically, that you can have a Northern Railway as a separate company, Southern, or you can corporatize by function, which is passenger, freight and tracks.
Actually, China, I think, has done both.
Yeah. Yes. And then you can skin it both ways. The last, after this, if you have successfully done this, maybe after 1 or 2 decades, then you privatize this. So I'm going to stop now and say, this is the roadmap: reform, corporatize, privatize.
Okay, Srivatsa, you first, but please keep it quick and short.
I agree with what Vinayak said. Corporatization, if we could do it for VSNL, there's no reason why we can't do it successfully for the railways. We have a model which has worked, and the Rakesh Mohan Committee has good recommendations which we should follow.
Mr. Aga.
Raghav, I completely agree with his point and his steps and the process. It's interesting, the reason why railways is at all a separate budget is because once upon a time the railway budget was bigger in size than the union budget.
That's correct.
That was
the British times.
100 years ago. Railway started in 1854 and our mindset is still there.
And we still continue.
But I want to make, apart from these bullet trains and high-speed tracks, I want to make a small point.
Yes.
Look at freight. Export and import freight, the railway share is very high.
Yes.
Because it requires no management. You get a rake and you just take it.
Right.
The moment you have to make a little effort, which is inland freight, it is all shifted to the road transport.
Right.
Now this is a colossal national waste. It is a waste of imported fuel, ecology, roads and so on. If we get this thing moving, we will actually bring down inflation in the country.
Right. So Dheeraj, railways is one of those things which again is very easy to write on a piece of paper, because traditionally in the last 15 years, railways is one portfolio that some of the senior members of a coalition partner actually demand.
Yeah. And the problem is that the whole outlook on railways is as a source of patronage for constituencies, for particular states, for particular people, and that mindset really desperately needs to change, because if you want to give away railways to a minister or to a party which is just going to use it, sort of milk it for their own,
regional state,
narrow
yes.
political gains, that's not going to work. And this is one thing the Prime Minister can do, because railways is completely under the control of this one ministry and of the central government. There's no state government involvement at all,
That's
no
right.
conflicts. So this is one thing the Prime Minister can do. So start, if not the Unified Ministry of Transport, appoint a railways minister, young, energetic, reformist mindset, who can do this, who will willing to cede his powers, who's willing to corporatize it, who's willing to think ahead, think big on bullet trains, fast trains. And we can't always say, look, it's too costly, we can't do it. This, I mean, China has done it, and it's remarkable the kind of benefits you can have. I mean, even in terms of urbanization, if you can have a fast-speed train between Delhi and cities within 250 kilometers,
That's right.
you'd have a huge growth of new urban centers and huge economic activity. So the gains are huge, the possibilities are huge, but you don't need a railway minister who's going to use it for narrow political gains.
And to build just for his particular state, because we've had only regional parties running railways.
And I think the old-fashioned style, you just increase the number, every budget you announce an increase in the number of trains,
Yes.
you won't do anything about fares.
Yes.
All that needs to change.
Okay, so let me quickly get a sense from the House, a poll. You've got a question, sir?
Yeah, I would like to add on to
Yes.
what Mr. Vinayak Chatterjee was saying. The predominantly, in addition to that, what I was thinking, like the biggest problem that railway is facing right now is monopolization.
Right.
Why can't there be a substitute where regional or local level
Which is what we've talked about.
private developers or some state level agencies are being appointed to do? A Konkan Railway is the biggest success story in that.
Absolutely. Now, question. Do you think the Prime Minister, we all know what is to be done, but in a lot of areas in India, we all know what is to be done. Question is, will the new Prime Minister, in your assessment, have the political will to do this? I think about 40% here seem to believe that he or she will be able to do it.
He may have the will, but probably he will not have the complete support to do it.
That's what you're saying. That's what you're saying. So almost 60% don't seem to believe. But Mr. Prime Minister or Madam Prime Minister, this is going to be one of those few things that you'll have to do within your first couple of weeks in office, because if the Railways Ministry again goes to a regional chieftain who's going to use it for patronage purposes, then we know that a big battle would have been lost. So before we go into a break, we've got this audience here who have got all their suggestions. They put them on a placard with the hashtag #TellTheNextPM, and all these suggestions that they're now going to show up for you, we will put together and give them to the next Prime Minister. I would also suggest that you should go to the hashtag #TellTheNextPM and give your suggestions.
Oh,